Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. Today we're going to look at the Beatles and which album that they chose as their favorite out of all the albums they created. And this is going to be interesting to find out because the Beatles produced excellent albums throughout their years together. The first one up is John Lennon. And he was the leader of the band, and he stated that the favorite album of his was the White Album. According to an interview he gave in 1971, John said that the White Album, I always preferred it to all the other albums, including Pepper, because I thought the music was better. The Pepper myth is bigger, but the music on the White Album is far superior, I think. And John also said that Paul never liked the album, stating, Paul never liked the White Album because the band members were all following their own talents and doing their own songs and not working as a group. And Paul wanted to be more like a group thing, which really means more Paul, so he never liked the album. John also confided that Paul didn't like that George had so many tracks on the album, which didn't really seem like he had that many because it was only 4 and the Lennon and McCartney had the rest, and there were 30 songs on the track. John loved this album because it was a rocking one, and it wasn't a concept album like Sgt. Pepper or an album of pieced together songs like the melody on Abbey Road. It was an album that allowed the band to do things on their own and to keep things simpler. Okay, next is Paul's favorite album. According to McCartneyTimes.com, in this revealing 1991 interview, Paul suggested he had a love for all the albums that they made together, but his favorite was the iconic 1967 concept album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The singer revealed it was a concept that he feels was really engaging, and he said, I'd pick Sgt. Pepper's myself because I had a lot to do with it. Well, that makes sense because Paul likes to be in control in the studio, and this one was his baby all the way. He said that it wasn't entirely his idea for the album, but he had a lot to do with it. It's during a return flight to London in November, Paul McCartney had an idea for a song involving an Edwardian military band, and that formed the impetus of the Sgt. Pepper concept album. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is so well crafted as a concept album, and all the songs fit together. It's a clever record that is still liked today. Next up, we have George's favorite album, and George Harrison agreed with John Lennon in his dislike of the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band because he felt the concept album had turned them into a puppet worker bee, and dreams of performing live once more, it was not a pleasant experience. It became an assembly process, just little parts and then overdubbing, and he felt they lost the edge that came with live performances. So when hearing this kind of made me wonder because I had read that John Lennon and George Harrison and Ringo, they really didn't want to perform live anymore, and it was Paul that really wanted to get back on stage. But it sounds like here that George and John were thinking that doing this concept album, was straying away from their live performances. So that was interesting to read about that. And in McCartney.com, George said that the album Rubber Soul, the most interesting thing about it was that we were suddenly hearing sounds that weren't able to hear before. Also, we were being more influenced by other people's music, and everything was blossoming at this time, including us. And it's hard to argue with an assessment as so widely held, and the proof, they say, is really in the pudding. George fondly remembers this album because it's when their music started changing, and they were taking things they heard by other people and creating their own style of song. And then I also read that John Lennon said that Rubber Soul was like the Marijuana album, and Revolver was like their LSD album. And it's a shame that they had to find inspiration with drugs, but it didn't seem like that could work, but they somehow did that. But I just wish they could have done it without using stuff like that. But they do have 2 great albums there, so I don't know what to think about that. This album is smooth, and George Martin said that before this album they were producing Beatle albums that were just singles strung together. And the Rubber Soul album, they've treated like an entity all its own. Okay, Ringo Starr's favorite album, last but not least. Ringo's favorite album is Abbey Road. McCartney.com stated, the drummer, an often maligned and yet incredibly gifted musician, even had a particular soft spot for what many people consider the worst part of the band's repertoire, the Abbey Road melody. The second side of Abbey Road is my favorite. Ringo said, I love it. While some people, Lennon included, couldn't stand the scraps of the LP, Ringo felt that they offered a sense of the band's talent. As she came in through the bathroom window and all those bits that weren't songs, they were just bits that John and Paul had around that they wrote together. And it's funny that John couldn't stand that the songs were not complete and pieced together, but I agree with Ringo that it works well. This album is a great album, and all the songs are good. But now that we know what albums are the Beatles' favorites, which one of the albums that they picked would you consider the best one? Just put it in the comment section below, and it'll be interesting to see what everyone has to say. Well, looking at all the great songs from the albums, it's so hard to choose one, but I think that George might be onto something, and I'm choosing Rubber Soul as my favorite of the four listed. There were so many styles of music on this album. You have Paul's pop-sounding Drive My Car, John's reflective songs Nowhere Man and In My Life, the country sounds of What Goes On and I'm Looking Through You. And then we have George's song, If I Needed Someone, where George is hesitant to get involved with the girl he has met, and he has someone he currently loves, but he gets this new girl's number just in case. That's classic George. He also had another great song, Think for Yourself, and George states he was inspired for free thinking, and he had the government in mind on this song, but he also thought it could relate to a failing relationship. Well, that's it for this episode, and I hope everybody's been having a good day. And if you like the video, if you could subscribe or like, that would be great. Thank you, and I hope you all have a good day. Bye.